Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Arsham here. So, you're somebody that's been an innovator in the world of AI for quite some time. You have a lot of experience being involved in Amazon with machine learning and seeing the cutting edge technologies that were happening there and being a part of that and making that come to fruition. And you realized that hiring needed to be solved and that AI could play a big role in that. And so, you built Ribbon, this company now that has just raised a great round, and you're going after a big issue and trying to solve it with automation, which is important. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So just kind of going back into like your story and your background, like how did your interest in the world of technology begin, and AI in general? Like what drew you to be passionate about this, to want to spend your time in machine learning and entrepreneurship around AI?
Yeah, I had a really unusual start into this world, I think, for someone who ended up working on recruiting and people tech. So I was lucky enough to be introduced into the AI space early. So I've seen this kind of really go from something where it was only called machine learning in the early days. I was working initially in 2014. Uh, that was when I started my PhD. And back then, there was no AI. It was just called machine learning. There weren't that many people interested in it. It was kind of like an ugly space. And then over the next 10 years, saw it turn into AI. And now, everyone uses some form of machine learning, every day, right? But when I started on it, it was actually kind of out of necessity and a little bit of luck. I was initially doing a PhD in the bio field, and we had this kind of data that wasn't analyzable by humans anymore. So we had this new technique that would analyze cells, and it just produced reams and reams of data. No way for humans to look at it. Started looking into machine learning techniques, got deeper and deeper into that space, and then eventually decided, I want to go all in on AI, and started applying AI to a bunch of different things, from imaging data, microscopes, started playing with voice data, and then that was kind of the rabbit hole that I went down, and the rest was history. Kind of never looked back after that.
What made you want to be at Amazon?
So the main draw there was that up to working at Amazon, kind of all the ML AI stuff that I'd done before then, it was helping, let's say, on the order of a few thousand people, right? And we were using just as complex algorithms as what Amazon would do, but I'd never deployed anything, never created a product that had helped, let's say, a million people. And then I was contacted by this team at Amazon who were really interested in the kinds of algorithms I was working on. And the opportunity there was basically, hey, we have this recommendation algorithm that's on the Amazon.com homepage. This serves AI-based recommendations to 500 million people every day. And so that was a huge draw for me, because all of a sudden I could go from working on products that were helping hundreds of people, maybe thousands, kind of at best, to helping 500 million people. And so that was just a massive, massive draw for me, thinking about what are the challenges that we have to solve, what are the edge cases when you're rolling something out to 500 million people, right? It's insane. You have to think about the very, very tail end of the population, and what's an unusual way that they would use this, or what's an unusual recommendation. And so for me, the scale was the huge draw there.
Yeah. Did you feel like you learned a lot at Amazon? It was a culture that enabled you to innovate and experiment, and it was a good time?
Look, Amazon has a really unique culture, I think, and unique in the way that it's intense. If you ask anyone who's spent a serious time at Amazon, they'll tell you, I think, two things really stick out, the engineering excellence, or just excellence across every area, I think is really high there. But it's also a very frugal, and maybe the right word is bare bones culture, right? There's not a lot of extra frills. It's not like the other big tech companies where you're getting free stuff every day, you do your laundry in house. Like Amazon really believes on we're here to do one thing, which is our mission, and just focus on that. And so I felt I learned a lot about just really taking things back to what's absolutely important, the bare necessities, can help you get stuff done like super fast and like a really high level. I think that was like one of my main learnings there. And then maybe the other learning was just like working with like other engineers who had seen like much larger systems than me, had a lot more experience than me. It was great to kind of soak all that up in a really quick amount of time.
So how did the idea for Ribbon come about? What made you want to jump ship and do something different?
Yeah, so the like genesis of Ribbon was really when I was head of AI at a startup called Ezra, who actually recently acquired just last week. Um, while I was head of AI there, I worked really closely with the head of people and talent because we had to hire a bunch of people into my team. Um, and the head of people and talent there is now my co-founder, Dave.
Mm.
So when we were at Ezra, honestly, we initially just started as friends, had a great working relationship together. But then there are a few crunch periods where we had to hire a bunch of people into my team or into the wider like engineering org. And so I would work with Dave, the head of people and talent there, super closely. We were under loads of pressure. Constantly people were like telling us like we have to hire this role, it has to be next week. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about like how do we hire at the like insane level that we want to. So like really good people, because as like an engineering leader within the company, I didn't want to work with subpar engineers, right? But then at the same time, we were being told you have to hire super fast. And so we had to balance these two things. And we spent a lot of time at Ezra thinking about what's the proper way to balance those, right? Like, how do you hire really fast? How do you assess someone in the shortest possible time? And so, like, after about a year of this, we ended up with what was essentially like a framework, right?
Hmm.
Of like, these are the things that we think really matter. These are the things that when we look at a profile, we think actually don't matter at all. And one of the conclusions was that like even after like a 5 minute conversation with a candidate, you can tell so much more than looking at their LinkedIn, resume, cover letter, like all the things that are written down about a candidate on the internet usually pale in comparison to just a super short chat. And so we thought about that like longer and longer, and kind of the end conclusion was like we wish that we could just have a short interview with every single candidate that would come into our pipeline. And kind of me being the AI guy that I was,
Mm.
thought about like why is this something that we can't do actually, right? At the time there were some voice AIs out already. We've had Alexa and Siri, for example, for a long time. So I thought the kind of prototype of it is out there, but we thought kind of deeper than that. Thought like, what if we could create a voice AI that could interview almost anyone for any role, unlock like the entire candidate pipeline instead of like only interviewing maybe like 20-30 people for a role. And then if we do that, you can like uncover these hidden gems, right? Like the candidates who would usually be overlooked because they have a shit resume, or they don't have anything on their LinkedIn profile, or there's some other reason why they're overlooked, right? And so that really eventually became Ribbon, right? We decided let's actually create this. Let's create a voice AI that shows emotion, is able to ask really great questions, able to follow up with those questions, and ultimately like interview a candidate in a really natural way, and at scale. So there's no limit.
Yeah. So what did it take to develop a system like this? I mean, with your expertise, it sounds like it wasn't too complicated, but it sounds like overall not a simple task.
There's a lot of work that goes into making it look easy, I guess, if that kind of makes sense. So like
Yeah.
in my world of AI, especially voice AI, one thing kind of trumps everything else, which is that if you have the most voice AI data, you will have the best like voice AI interview, right? So really early on, we set our sights on thinking about how do we make ourselves the company with the most interview data. And our conclusion after like thinking about this for a while was that each company kind of interviews at let's say super different scales. So you have like startups that will maybe interview like 40 people for one single role, right? And then you have large enterprises or like high volume hirers who interview at like massive scale. Just one example there. Think about some of the largest manufacturers in the US. they interview way more people than let's say like a small startup, because they have these roles that get lots of applicants. They have these huge factories that just need a lot of workers, and they have really high turnover, right? And so we thought, okay, if we focus ourselves on the high volume hirer side of things, we will ultimately see more interviews much faster. And so as a result of that, as we get that engine going, we'll have more data. And if we have more data, we'll be able to use that to improve the AI interviewer itself, right? And so like ultimately that's the position we're in now, which is that we're working with these large high volume hirers. One example I'll give you is one of our customers is Indeed.com. And so they interview at really high scale with us, right? As a result of that, we see loads of interviews, and we use all those interviews to improve the like voice AI itself. One quick kind of fact I'll throw out there: it's looking that likely that late this year, if you kind of aggregate all the interviews that we do, Ribbon as a company will become the fastest interviewing company anywhere on earth. And that's really just a result of the fact that we interview on behalf of all these high volume hirers. They do lots of interviews themselves, and so we see so many interviews, right?
Yeah, that's an amazing partnership to have. How did that kind of come about?
That came about. I think a few people like Indeed and others have had us on their radar for a while, right? They've seen our growth trajectory. They've seen the number of interviews that we're doing. They've seen the kind of technology that we've built, and so they reached out to us actually kind of initially, like early on. We didn't feel like we had enough of the product to kind of like serve a company like that. And then over the last 6 months or so, we've worked on like enterprise features, right? Like things that a large company like Indeed would find useful and want. And so naturally, the kind of conversation kept going. We'd always stayed in touch, and it reached a point where they thought, okay, we can actually jump in with these guys. Like they have something that can interview at the scale that we need.
So, I mean, do you see this as like a supplement to the traditional interview, as an addition? Like, how do you kind of you see it as part of the screening process? Like, where do you see this fitting in most?
Yeah, I'd say 80% of companies that use Ribbon will use our AI interviewer like instead of the first like screening interview, right? So think like at the top of the funnel. But having said that, like two things I want to highlight. One is that if you look over even the last year, the culture in this space has shifted a ton. So I think if you went back a year and a half ago, the idea of interviewing with an AI interviewer seemed like science fiction, like no one was ready for that. And then about a year ago, like people started to become more open to it. There was a lot of skepticism. Now, where we are today is it's almost kind of completely accepted, I'd say. We get very little pushback from companies. On the candidate side of things, they tend to love it more than a traditional interview, because you can interview with Ribbon like any time of day, right? Like you could interview at like 1 a.m. And we see that with a lot of interviews. Just an example there, around 30% of the interviews that we conduct right now happen between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Mhm.
local time.
Wow.
So a really significant number of interviews are happening at times when you could just never get a recruiter to jump on that
Mhm.
call. So that like added flexibility is huge. But to kind of like answer your original question, each company, what we're seeing is pretty unique, right? Like there's no one way to hire across all companies. So even though most of them use us at the top of the funnel as like the initial interview, we have some companies that will have like 3 rounds of Ribbon interviews. Some that will have the like AI interview at the very end. I think like that's kind of the beauty of this kind of technology, like an AI that almost acts like a human, is that it is really flexible. You can kind of slot it in whenever you want, and there's no hard and fast rule about how you like have to do that.
Mhm. Do you see this replacing the recruiter, or it just kind of optimizes their process?
I don't see us as replacing recruiters, but I do see us as making them like 100x more efficient, right? So
Mhm.
like what we often hear, and we hear that a lot actually from the recruiters that we work with, is like initially they kind of approach us, they say like I'm really interested in using this, but in the long term I'm worried that you will like replace me
Mhm.
entirely, right? And I I kind of understand that as well, but I think if you look at every technology that we've developed kind of so far as human civilization, it's really just made us more efficient, and it's often gotten rid of like the tasks that we don't enjoy, right? And so that's kind of my mental model for like Ribbon for almost every recruitment team as well, is that there's a lot of tasks that people hate that we can actually just alleviate, right? Like some examples I give there. Recruiters spend most of their time jumping on initial interviews with people who are not qualified, right? So like uh, over 50% of first interviews are people who are like missing one of the qualifications that was written in the requirements, or have lied about something, or don't even actually show up for the interview. And so that's so much wasted time for them. And so we hear that from a lot of recruiters, like, this is a part of my job that I really don't enjoy, that I wish we could come up with a kind of more efficient solution, right? And then so the way I think about Ribbon in the long term as well is like each and every task that recruiters don't enjoy, we would love to create an AI agent for that, right? So if you think about like scheduling, which is often quite robotic emails that they're sent back and forth, that's another place where I think we can help recruiters a lot. And ultimately, what's left at the end of that is only the tasks that like people really enjoy are actually left, right? And there'll always be a human in the loop. I really strongly believe that. Humans will be making like the ultimate decision. It's not going to be made by Ribbon or some other system, but we just help kind of ease the friction along that whole process.
Yeah, I like where you sit. I think it's an interesting place, because it's a place that they shouldn't be afraid that you're replacing them, and you can really optimize their workflow. You're almost like the ChatGPT of the recruiting world, essentially.
That's right, right. And I think at this point, I don't think anyone's thinking that ChatGPT will necessarily like completely replace a bunch
Yeah,
of jobs, but it's making everyone more efficient, right? And I know that everyone is using it in some respect or another as like part of their day to day.
yeah. So, what's kind of your vision here? Like, where do you see Ribbon going? What's like the 5 to 10 year plan?
Yeah, I think like the way I think about Ribbon, like we've always thought about this kind of since we founded the company, is that if you look at the information on people that's out there, so on like LinkedIn and other platforms similar to LinkedIn, it's not a lot. Like the information level is like pretty inaccurate, not that helpful, and lacking. Like you're not really able to like action that to like hire someone, right? So like the example I give, you look at the average LinkedIn profile. There's not a lot of information there. You look at someone's experiences on there, they've written maybe one or two sentences, but what are the things that are missing? Like, what did you actually achieve at that company? Who did you work with? What was your like, real impact? Why did you leave? Why did you join in the first place? Like all that stuff is missing from a LinkedIn profile. Most of that stuff is missing from a resume. Um, Almost all that's missing from a cover letter, right? So like the like mental model that I think about Ribbon, and I think how everyone should think about Ribbon, is that we are the key information on someone's experience is inside their mind, right? Like that's really the only place where it is. And the best interface to get that information is via voice. It's the easiest way to understand like what someone actually thinking about this job, what did they really achieve, what was their key kind of takeaways from their last job. And so our future vision is to like unlock that information so that hiring for everyone is more efficient, right? As a candidate or an applicant, you should be able to job hop the second that you don't enjoy your job, and you should be able to have a job lined up within a day, right? I really strongly believe that. And so we want to reduce that friction so that applicants have more choices. And then I think conversely, like on the company side of things, it shouldn't be a 3 month pain to hire someone for a role, right? You should be able to say, like, here's the pool of applicants. Let's interview them all within the next hour. And then from that, let's pick the top one, right? And so we really see this world where hiring in general can happen in like under a few hours, end to end. And ultimately that means that people will spend less time in jobs that they don't like, more
Mhm.
time in jobs that they like really, really enjoy.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, automation is going to improve a lot of areas, but I think what you've done is like you've really figured out a customized avenue with a great niche that there really needs to be automation in. And I mean, you'll probably enable recruiters to do a lot more fine-tuned job searching and just be a lot less frustrated and a lot happier with what you're doing. And companies will be happier because they'll get better candidates. So you're at a win-win situation for lots of different groups, which I think is important. But I mean, that was pretty much all the questions I had. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think it's a really good niche and it's exciting. And I'm just looking forward to seeing Ribbon develop much further. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Ben.